Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandra Kilgore, the Vice Mayor of the City of Asheville, and I'd like to welcome you to the December 7th, 2023 Agenda Briefing Work Session. All council members and staff are participating virtually. The live meeting will be streamed on the city's YouTube channel, accessed through the YouTube icon on the front page of the city's website or via the live stream. The live meeting will be available on Charter Spectrum Channel 193, and you may listen to the meeting via phone at 855-925-2801, meeting code 5484. And we will not be taking public comment during this meeting. Council and staff, please unmute yourself and say a quick hello. Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Kim Rooney.
Good morning.
City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Rachel Wood.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good morning.
City Attorney Brad Brennan.
Good morning.
City Clerk Maggie Burleson.
Good morning.
And also Esther Manheimer will not be able to attend this morning, the meeting today. And Councilwoman Maggie Ullman will be joining us a little later. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our City Manager, Deborah Campbell.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And again, hello and good morning. This is our typical agenda preview of your meeting for December the 12th that will be coming up this Tuesday. We will have Rachel Wood, who is going to provide the detailed overview of our formal meeting, again, that begins at 5 o'clock. We do also have a capital improvement program process work session that will begin at 3 o'clock as well. So it's going to be a long day, and we have some council committee meetings on that day as well. We apologize, but a lot of work to get done. This will be our only meeting in December. So obviously this agenda is fairly crowded or large in terms of the number of items that we will review, particularly related to the consent agenda. So with that, Rachel Wood is going to review the detailed agenda. And if you all have items that you want her to review that wasn't called out, please ask questions. And we have a plethora of staff who are here that can help us hopefully respond to any questions that you all may have. So with that, I will turn it over to Rachel, and she will take it from here.
Thank you, Deborah, and good morning again, Vice Mayor and members of the City Council. As Deborah mentioned, we will be starting at 3 o'clock on Tuesday with the CIP work session, with the formal business meeting set to begin at 5 o'clock in the council chambers. On the December 12th business meeting, the first item, we do have one proclamation, and that is a recognition of the efforts of the Mills River Partnership Restoration and Protection of the Riverbank and Riparian Buffer. Maria Wise and Damon Hearn will be in attendance to receive that presentation. Going through the consent agenda, as is our typical process, I'm going to highlight a few items, but as Deborah stated, please let me know if I skip over an item that you want to have covered. And we do have a number of staff available to answer more detailed questions if I'm not able to provide the level of detail necessary. So I'm going to start with item B. Item B is authorization to enter into a contract with WNC Landscaping for pressure washing, litter collection in the Central Business District. weed control, cleaning of city garbage cans, and on-call hotspot cleaning totaling $286,550 for fiscal year 2024, with the option for 2 additional one-year extensions. WNC Landscaping has provided these services in the Central Business District for 10 years. And I do want to note that this is a separate agreement from the ARPA-funded roadside litter contract that the city also has with WNC Landscaping for litter hotspot cleanup outside of the Central Business District. Moving on, the next item I am going to highlight is item E. This is a good news item. The Parks and Recreation Department was awarded a $70,000 mentoring for youth impacted by substance misuse grant to pilot a 2.5-year mentorship program for youth impacted by the opioid epidemic in the Asheville area. The requested resolution will authorize an interlocal agreement with Asheville City Schools for the use of Asheville Middle School to provide mentoring sessions to youth. So congratulations to the Parks Department for receiving that grant, and can't wait to hear about the great work that they do with youth at Asheville Middle. I will note that item F is a motion to adopt the fiscal year 24-25 budget calendar. So we are in the most wonderful time of the year, which is not the holiday season, but we are now in budget season. And so we have a series of work sessions starting December 12th all the way through the spring, culminating with City Council budget adoption on June 11th, 2024. So we are in our extended season of budget development. Moving on to item H. Item H is authorization to sign purchasing agreements with Axon Enterprise for APD's equipment, including body-worn cameras, tasers, in-car cameras, and interview room recording systems, as well as drone management software through a cooperative purchasing alliance agreement. Existing police operating funds are available to fully fund the contract price. And there is some time sensitivity around this item because current pricing changes will go into effect on January 1st with a potential 15% increase. With that, I see we've got some questions from Councilmember Roney.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, I'll keep this brief because we have a long meeting today. I just wanted to let y'all know that because the drone software is lumped in with this and we're lacking a public-facing drone policy or conversation that I think we're overdue for, I won't be supporting this item as it's currently drafted with that being packaged in.
Thank you, Kim.
Okay, there are no other questions on this item. The next item I'm planning to highlight is item K. This is a construction contract with Young and McQueen Grading Company to address failing stormwater infrastructure at the municipal golf course. Construction is scheduled to start in late December 2023 with a 90-day construction timeline, and really highlighting this project because it is one of our tourism product development funded projects with a total project cost of $1.4 million. Moving on to item L, this is an item that has previously been discussed at the Environment and Safety Committee. In June of 2023, the Asheville Housing Authority contacted the city manager requesting that the city take on parking enforcement at their properties. Many of the interior streets in Asheville Housing Authority developments are privately owned. So the requested ordinance on the December 12th agenda would enable city staff to regulate and administer parking on the Housing Authority's privately owned streets. While the Housing Authority requested that the city take on parking enforcement at all of their properties, we are going to start with a pilot at Hillcrest. Asheville Housing Authority staff will take care of resident outreach before enforcement begins, and our hope is that there is voluntary compliance and that there will be very little enforcement activity required. The ordinance would technically give staff the ability to begin enforcement on January 1st, but staff will wait until the Housing Authority has confirmed that ample public outreach has occurred prior to initiating formal enforcement. Councilmember Roney.
Two things. One, I attended the Housing Authority meeting for a different reason on the day that this was brought forward. And so I appreciated having the resolution that far in advance to kind of look at the why and the reason and the ask. I am curious, having watched the Environment and Safety Committee, when we think about doing outreach and then also implementation, which department will be overseeing both of those? Will enforcement staff just be the parking enforcement like we have downtown?
Yes, it'll be parking services primarily. The Housing Authority has actually requested that they take the lead on outreach, and city staff in both parking services as well as CAPE are available to provide additional supplementary community engagement upon request of the Housing Authority.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Mosley.
And just by way of information, I just want to make it known that this request initially came forward from residents living in Hillcrest. I had the opportunity to attend a few of their resident meetings, and members of the community made this request to management. So it stems from within the community, just by way of information.
Thank you.
Okay, the only other item I'll highlight on the consent agenda is, with December 12th being the last city council meeting of the calendar year, item O is a resolution adopting the city council's 2024 meeting schedule. I'll now move into presentations and reports. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Roney.
Yeah, I wanted to see if item B was going to get brought up, but oh wait, let's see, item C. My ask is, can we just move this to new business? Because I can't support it as it's currently drafted, and it seems like changing a document about one of our advisory boards doesn't necessarily need to be a consent agenda item, especially if we know it's going to get pulled. I've already articulated in boards and commissions some of my reason why, but just as a matter of procedure, it seems that it would be more appropriate under new business.
So I think, Maggie, if there's no objection from any other council members, that could be easily done. Correct? Okay.
Thank you for that consideration.
Absolutely.
Okay, we will now move into presentations and reports. First item is a presentation of the fiscal year 2023 audit from our finance department, as well as the city's new external auditor, Cherry Bakert. Then moving to the city manager's report, Brenda Mills continues to win awards, so she will get recognized for 2 additional prestigious awards that she has been granted. And then I will provide a presentation on the city's fiscal year 2023 annual report. I do want to note that not currently listed on the agenda, Dr. Dwight Mullen, who's the chair of the Community Reparations Commission, will be added to the presentation section of the agenda to discuss the Community Reparations Commission's extension request. And we do have time slotted later on today's agenda to further discuss the extension request. So I do ask that we hold on any questions that we have, because Brenda and I are going to provide some additional details later as a part of today's agenda briefing. So moving on, I'm going to let Ben Woody cover public hearings.
Thank you, Rachel. I am going to cover the 3 public hearings we have scheduled for this meeting. So again, good morning, Vice Mayor Kilgore, members of council. I will start with public hearing item A, and Allison, if you can display an image. This is a resolution to close an unopened right-of-way between Sulphur Springs Road and Lane Avenue in West Asheville. The applicant has indicated that the purpose of this closure is to allow for the future construction of additional housing units on the property. And as council's aware, once a street is closed, the property, if it's closed, then reverts to the adjoining properties. So again, that creates additional, in this case, developable land for housing units. The Technical Review Committee reviewed this request in July, and they do recommend approval. The request went to our Multimodal Transportation Commission in August. That advisory board voted to not recommend approval to council. That was a 5-2 vote. The reasons the MMTC gave for their denial was number one, the presence of an unpermitted retaining wall at one of the adjoining properties. And then also the desire to have staff complete a comprehensive study of all the unopened right-of-ways in the city of Asheville. And of course, you'll get a more detailed presentation from transportation staff at the public hearing. Any questions on item A? Councilwoman Roney.
It seems that this could be potentially future flag lots. Are we lining those up so this doesn't get confusing?
That's a good question. We do not have a development application as of yet, so I am not able to articulate what the proposed development would look like. And again, I don't know enough about the geometry of what the lots would look like to even know if they would support flag lots.
Okay, thank you.
I will flag that as a question that transportation can be aware of. Councilwoman Turner.
I just want to echo a little support for this idea that we better understand all of these closures I feel like we're seeing these a lot and I don't quite understand why. It could just be a simple explanation of there's hundreds that have been on the books forever. I don't know, but I feel like I'm getting these piecemeal and very often. I would support a grander picture.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll just know there are probably thousands of these right-of-ways in the city, and we can certainly reach out to the applicant to see for this particular request if we can get a little fuller picture of what the development plan is. But again, I'll just note real quickly, in any event, this development, if this were approved, it would be a by right development. So the actual construction of the houses presumably would not come back to council, and they would have to meet whatever zoning requirements would apply in this situation.
And I was just wondering then, they do have record of the affected properties that they've reached out to. And I was just wondering what type of responses have they received from the community around it?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any negative responses from the surrounding community. But again, if there are, we'll make sure those are highlighted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so with no other questions, I will move on to public hearing item B. And Allison, if you can display that site plan. Or excuse me, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Roney.
Yeah, I guess I'm sorry to belabor this, but I know we've been getting several emails from a neighbor that was really confused about when there's proximal development, what the process looks like of alerting. So yeah, I would definitely like to see what it looks like for neighbors to be contacted when there's a situation like this right-of-way closure. Once again, as part of a bigger picture map. I know we've talked about that some with the neighborhood alert system, and we probably don't have that on a super micro level for something like this, but maybe this is an example that could bring into such a time what the process looks like. So if folks reach out after the fact, when there's construction happening, we can point back to our very clean, tidy, accessible process.
Great, thank you for that feedback. Okay, moving on to public hearing item B. This is a conditional zoning request for 2 Butler Road. You did consider this request at your November 14th meeting. After the public hearing, or following the public hearing, this was continued to your December meeting, so it's back before you. As a quick reminder on this one, the rezoning request is over 8 acres, 8.88 acres. It has frontage on Long Shoals Road. It includes new building construction with a total of 279 units in 4 to 5 story multifamily buildings. Has some other site amenities included as well. The applicant is proposing 10% of the units be affordable at 80% AMI for a minimum of 20 years. As we discussed last time, TRC and planning staff do recommend approval. Planning and zoning considered this at their October meeting. That resulted in a motion to approve, but that motion failed on a 3-3 vote. And then again, it was left with the developer going out and considering some additional perhaps some additional conditions to this development. I do not have that list of finalized conditions yet, but my understanding is the developer will share those once finalized, and of course, they'll be presented to council at your meeting. Councilwoman Turner.
Just real quick, yeah, I had reached out to ask them just, what's changed, if anything, and I got kind of a long range of things that included what was already, it was kind of unclear to me. It would be great if staff could just highlight what has changed from the previous meeting to this one. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback, and I've already talked to planning staff this morning, and we will absolutely be prepared to do that. I just don't have enough clarity on that today to go through that, but absolutely, as soon as we know that information, we'll make sure council has that and it's presented. Any other questions on public hearing item B? Hearing none, I will move to item C. Public hearing item C has two actions associated with it. And Allison, if we can show the site plan. This is 115 Fairview Road. The first is a conditional zone. Actually, I'm going to say these out of order, but you have a conditional zoning request that will be considered. Actually, that will be the second action. Accompanying that, we have a Louise request as well, and that would be the first action, and that's how it's listed on your agenda. But real quickly, I'll highlight the conditional zoning, then highlight the Louise request. So for the conditional zoning, again, it's 115 Fairview Road, and they're requesting to change this from urban village to residential expansion. The project is seeking the conditional zoning, so it's coming to council because of the size of it. It is a 281 unit multifamily project with a density of 34.1 units per acre. The project is proposed to include 20% of the 281 units as affordable and 80% AMI or below. And then within that, 50% of those affordable units are proposed to accept housing choice vouchers. In terms of the land use, the project is largely technically compliant with our UDO. It is seeking some technical modifications related to building setbacks, sidewalk widths, and access, and those are listed in the staff report. For the CZ request, TRC recommends approval of this with conditions. It went to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that body also recommended unanimous approval. Any questions on the conditional zoning aspect of this? Okay, related, moving into the Louise request, there is a request from the developer for a Louise land use incentive grant. Staff does recommend approval of that request as is consistent with the policy. This did go to the HCD Council Committee. They reviewed the Louise request, at their November 27th meeting, and they voted 1-2 on a motion of support, which means that motion of support failed on a 1-2 vote. This item is also scheduled to go before the December 12th Policy, Finance, and HR Council Committee. So that committee will hear this and make their recommendation prior to the council meeting. Questions on the Louise request? Yes, Councilwoman Roney.
Yeah, I guess this is more like a general statement about since we've seen the Thrive report, which puts into writing a lot of the narrative data that we already had. I realize that we give our staff instructions, this council and previous council. And so this is not a reflection on the staff work of this, but just our policy and its outcomes. And for me, land use incentive grant, the way it's currently written, isn't helping us meet our strategic goal of equitable, affordable housing. And in that failure, the long-term Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan goals. So in general, I'm not inclined to support land use incentive grant as it's currently being used. So I'm not going to be supporting this. And I just wanted to let everyone know today so that we have a little bit more time and flexibility with everyone involved, because I know that could potentially impact the rest of the conversation on Tuesday.
Thank you, Councilwoman Turner.
Hey, y'all. Sorry, I can't be on camera at the moment. I guess I'm sensing a larger problem around how we're understanding the Thrive study, and I want to make sure I'm not going down a road that isn't accurate. So, and I'll just be really brief. The study is an assessment in theory of, do our current policies and incentive programs create the outcomes we think we are trying to target? Unfortunately, the study was done on household sizes of 4, and we don't target household sizes of 4 with our policies. So what that study has done for me is highlighted something extremely important, which we've been talking more and more about, which is we are not creating family size units. And to me, that's a new problem. But in HCD, I was the yay vote because I'm having a problem denying a request based on our current policies that does meet our policies. So if we really want to use the Thrive outcomes to create better policy, let's do that. I think it might be helpful if, instead of me just interpreting that way, if we heard from staff, if that's really if I'm interpreting that correctly, it would be helpful. Because I'm seeing the 4 household. We're not actually ever doing that. We're building all these 1 bedrooms, sometimes a 2 bedroom. So I don't know if it's a practical way to look at it. I hope that makes sense.
Antoinette, Councilor.
So in response to Sage's position about the utilization of the 4-person household, typically, and the reason that 4-person household is used is because that's typically the metric that the federal government uses. So if we were to discount the 4-person household metric, we would also then need to discount every other AMI metric. And also from a practical and a statistical standpoint, the median income for African Americans is so far from the median income of one white person that, statistically speaking, that would mean that in order for the findings that Thrive presented, in order for those findings to be incorrect, one would have to assume that every single Black person in Asheville is a 6-figure income earner. And I simply have not seen any data that supports that position.
Councilor Turner.
Yeah, so I guess this is what I'm getting at. So what we have here is we used ARPA money to fund a study, and we're accepting it, but we haven't gotten the analysis from staff that say this is how we're interpreting this according to our policies. I don't know if that's something staff plans to do or could do. But if Antoinette is correct in this theory, I want to be able to understand that. I'm not getting that from the study. There's a lot of anecdotal stuff alongside it. So it would just be really helpful. And I'm just sharing this so that I don't want us to start shutting down Luigi because of this reaction. I want us to figure out Luigi is my hope. But so it would be great if staff were able to do that. I don't know if you need more support to ask that or what.
As you recall, a couple of years ago, I brought this issue to the fore. And what I can say is every local study that we've done, primarily the state of Black Asheville data, reveals, separate and apart from Thrive, that an individual Black person in our area has a salary that's far below the individual median income of a white person. So if we were to even extrapolate from the state of Black Asheville, it would reveal that a single Black person typically is far below the 80% AMI. So that's even without regard to Thrive. So really, the Thrive report actually buttresses the previous findings of the state of Black Asheville reports, just as an aside.
Okay, so what I'm hearing here basically is that has been a known fact that basically that was one of my concerns too, metrics that are used for those grants. And I thought at one point we were discussing actually sort of putting a pause on Luigi grants until we had actually worked out a lot of these particulars to make it more equitable for the community. And if someone could speak as to where we are on that, I greatly appreciate it. Councilwoman Rooney?
Yeah, before we move forward, I saw that Maggie just joined, and I just wanted to like give, just a little grace here and say, Maggie, we're talking about the land use incentive grant part of our agenda for this project. And I articulated that it's with appreciation for staff who's following our instruction and knowing there's updates coming soon. I'm feeling like I can't support land use incentive grant the way that it's written in general until we do the updates, because I'm concerned it isn't meeting our goals. And so right now we're having a conversation with staff.
And if I may, Vice Mayor, I do want to note that as part of her 115 Fairview Luigi presentation to both Policy, Finance, and HR Committee, as well as to full council as part of the public hearing, Sasha Vertunsky is going to go through a Luigi program background. She's going to provide some recap and highlights on the Thrive report, and then she's going to provide a brief update on where we are with the body of work that Enterprise has underway to update the affordable housing plan, which includes an assessment of all of our affordable housing incentives, including the Housing Trust Fund, as well as the Land Use Incentive Grant. We do not have a December Housing and Community Development Committee, but at our January HCD meeting, we will be planning an update, and we will be discussing what has just been brought up. How should we strategically look at those Luigi applications that are in the queue, or we've at least been given an indication from developers that they would like to apply for a Luigi? If we're going to do this holistic review of our affordable housing tools, we probably need to communicate with the development community where we are in that process and let them know when we may or may not be continuing the consideration of those applications. So we do plan on having a more robust conversation in January with the committee. And then as part of Tuesday's council meeting, Sasha's just going to provide a high-level overview, reminding kind of the why behind the Luigi program, highlighting where we are with the Thrive report, and then where we are in progress with the affordable housing plan update. We do plan on having the update recommendations finalized by May of 2024, and that body of work is currently underway.
And then I'm sorry. Sage, you had your hand raised. I'm sorry.
It's okay, Deborah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that the Thrive report is one point of information. We will be getting information from the Enterprise Foundation and then culling all of that information into an assessment of our broader overall housing policies, including Luigi and all of the others that we use to incent the development of affordable housing.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And I think that will appease my concerns as well. And I think at one point, even maybe during Thrive's kind of presentation during our last agenda briefing, we mentioned, could they create the data for the 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom goals? Because to them, it's just like changing data on a spreadsheet and the graphs change. So I'd be curious to know if we've reached out to them and could potentially ascertain that those details and updated charts and metrics with the 1 and 2 bedroom or 1 and 2 size household.
And on that note, and I recognize that this might not even be possible, I'd be interested in knowing the actual data, the actual demographics of folks in the units that we have incentivized.
Yeah, Antoinette, they also said that HACA could provide the data for those that needed the households most, that were existing voucher holders and their family size. Like maybe throughout this with Enterprise and Thrive, communicating with them, we can kind of get this whole picture, because I feel like that's what I'm lacking.
But also keep in mind, though, under Luigi, we're not necessarily utilizing vouchers.
Well,
so
but
then that data,
we're having them commit to accepting.
that very likely we aren't, because our we're doing 80% AMI. Remember, the vouchers are 30. Yeah. So that's kind of the point of contention.
But when we set them aside, they have to use those incomes. They immediately drop to the 30.
And most developers do not set them aside.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, we just need the bigger picture.
We will accept. And at a later time, I can send you information about the developers that actually have set aside vouchers. Like, for instance, I know that 319 is a developer that has a certain number of vouchers set aside through the housing authority. And also another entity that I think we're going to vote on that's doing 100% affordable housing. We just voted on that in AHEC. So they're doing 60, 50, and 30. We just voted to allow them housing trust fund in our last HUD meeting.
Yeah.
So they have set aside vouchers as well.
Yeah, I love that we've adopted that language. I credit you with those wordings, but I do think we're doing it more and more often. Anyways, I'm belaboring the point. I just need a broader perspective. So thank you, everyone.
Councilwoman Rooney, did you have a question?
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious because I would love to have a really not a reactive conversation about the wholeness of this project on Tuesday. Is if we knew that there were still so many questions about land use incentive grant, then I think we would potentially get a better conversation and a less reactive conversation on Tuesday if we're not gonna, if the land use incentive grant isn't gonna pass. So I guess I'm just curious. I'm a no, but this is a way we can maybe have a more robust conversation on Tuesday. Is if the funding is going to be in question for the project as a whole, then I feel like it's a benefit to the developer and the community to know.
Okay, Rachel?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I do appreciate the conversation today. We'll definitely take the feedback received to inform finishing touches on the presentation for the public hearing, as well as for the Policy, Finance, and HR Committee. With regard to voucher set aside, I did want to note that following conversation with the Housing and Community Development Committee, the developer has offered to set aside 50% of the affordable units, which equals 29 units for voucher holders. And based on Housing Authority data, which was included in the Thrive study, 95% of tenant mobility voucher holders have household incomes in the 0 to 30% AMI range, and 44% of those voucher holders are African American households. So just wanted to provide that information to help inform the decision-making process.
Thank you.
Okay, so barring any additional conversation on 115 Fairview, we can move to new business. First item under new business is also related to the city's affordable housing tools, and that is a resolution approving revisions to the Housing Trust Fund policy. Some of the key revisions include revised priorities focused on the addition of much needed units, deeper affordability, and accepting vouchers, as well as longer affordability periods. The revisions also include allowing off-site infrastructure improvements as an eligible expense if the developer can demonstrate that those improvements will only benefit the affordable development, and changes to maximum loan amount from 10% of the total development cost to 10% of total development cost per affordable unit. These revisions were unanimously approved by AHAC, as well as the Housing and Community Development Committee at their November 27th meeting. And the changes need to go into effect following the December 12th meeting because staff plans to open the call for applications for the next round of Housing Trust Fund developments on December 15th, in keeping with the county's cycle. As you may recall, last year was the first year that we synced up our application process with Buncombe counties. Okay, moving on. The last item on the agenda is item B, which is the consideration of a resolution to amend a previous Housing Trust Fund loan for Fairhaven Summit, which is located off of Sweeten Creek Road. This is a 77 unit, 100% affordable project that has a broad mix of funding, including a low income housing tax credit, $500,000 in previously approved Housing Trust Fund dollars, as well as funding from Buncombe County and home funds. The developer of this project is requesting an additional $475,000 in HTF funds to address a gap caused primarily by increased interest rates. 20 units of this project will be set aside for project-based vouchers, and 11 units will utilize the KEY program for low-income residents with disabilities who are in need of supportive services. The requested Housing Trust Fund loan will comprise 4.26% of the total development cost, and that is including the additional $475,000, which is well below the 10% cap. And if approved, the additional housing trust fund allocation would still keep the total per unit subsidy from the city at $12,622 per unit. So well below that $80,000 typical cap that we have established. The Housing and Community Development Committee reviewed this item on November 27th and voted 3-0 in support of this request. Any questions on this item? Okay, so that concludes our review of the December 12th City Council agenda, and we will now go into our review of remaining December Council Committee agendas, starting with the Planning and Economic Development Committee, and I will let Ben Woody cover that.
Thank you, Rachel. We have 2 items scheduled for PED next Monday. The first is an update from our Public Art and Cultural Commission Advisory Board. That I really have the principal focus of that will be just to provide the annual update from that advisory board, where they'll highlight some of their recent accomplishments as well as some of the things they want to work on 2024, the year coming up. There also will have some discussion on the requested ordinance changes, and Councilman Roney, those are the ones that you highlighted to move to new business for our council meetings. So again, PED will have some discussion with the chair of the PAC at their meeting on Monday prior to that council meeting. The other item we have on PED is the missing middle housing update. As council is probably aware of, that study has been completed. We have a draft report, and the planning staff will be at PED to provide a pretty detailed update on that. What you can expect in that update is kind of a review of the basis. So some of the data that underpins the recommendations in the report, as well as staff will plan to highlight some of the key recommendations. And that report actually has 43 recommendations, as well as 14 anti-displacement strategies. So there's a lot of content that's included in that report. One thing to note is this is in fact just a report, so this is information sharing. Any implementation of those recommendations or anti-displacement strategies will move forward as another process, because of course before we implement anything, we'll want to make sure, one, that the community has access to that, as well as council as part of that process. So again, this is just an overview of the report. Following PED, it will come to full council as well. Any questions on the PED agenda for this month? If not, I will turn it, I think actually I'll turn it over to Ms. Campbell to review policy and finance.
Thank you, Dan. The Policy, Finance, and HR Committee meeting will be held on December the 12th. Starts at 10 o'clock. There are a few really non-controversial items on the agenda, the first one being the Luigi request at 115 Fairview that we just discussed. So I'm thinking that's going to be a lively discussion. That is an action item on the agenda for this committee to act on and provide a recommendation. And as you heard, a lot of detail about this particular project and request. The next item is the Water Department cost of service rate design. We will have the consultants from Raftellus along with city staff that will be presenting options for moving forward as it relates to modifications in terms of the rates for our customers, water customers. We are not asking for any action. The action would come in terms of any changes to the fees or the rates would come as part of the normal budget process that would happen sometime in March or April. So that is it for the particular meeting on December the 12th. A lot of information will be covered. Ms. Roney?
Yeah, I just want to bring this up because we've been having conversations about wage and compensation, policy, finance, and HR. And it came to my attention that there might be some preemptive language in the state budget under 449A. And it would help, I think, if we're having these conversations at a PED level, but hopefully also at a future council level, if we understood how the state budget is impacting our ability to say, incentivize or require living wages for our contract employees. It certainly would add to my understanding, but I expect we'll need to have that conversation at the budget level as well.
Sure. We are prepared, hopefully in January, to start talking about compensation philosophy and bringing that to the committee. And we will definitely have that information for you at that time.
Thank you.
Sure. That's it for me. And I think we're going to equity and inclusion. And Rachel?
Thank you, Deborah. Yes, the Equity and Engagement Committee is going to meet on a non-standard time due to the holidays. We have scheduled our December meeting for Friday, December 15th, starting at 11:30 a.m. The first item on the agenda is information sharing on a 3-year renewal of the production agreement with MLK Association, who successfully executed a week of events for the 2023 Juneteenth celebration. As part of this 3-year renewal, staff is recommending incorporating the MLK Peace March and Rally, which is produced by the MLK Association, into the production agreement. Adding the MLK Peace March and Rally to the city's catalog of federal holiday commemorations will result in a total of 6 federal holiday productions supported by the city of Asheville. Next on the EEC agenda, we have the standing update from the Department of Equity and Inclusion, sharing details on where we are with the Cease the Harm audit, as well as summarizing progress made at the December 4th Community Reparations Commission. And then finally on the agenda for December, we have 2 updates from CAPE on the progress they're making with ARPA funded projects to upfit community spaces, to enhance access to government, and on language accessibility. I'll also note that the Finance Department is planning to have a discussion ready for the January EEC meeting on the request to identify additional funding to support the Strategic Partnership Grant Program. So just wanted to make sure that the EEC members knew that we do have that slated for the January meeting. Moving on to the review of the 8-week agenda. This has already been said, but just want to reiterate that December 12th is the last council meeting of the calendar year. And so our next full meeting of the City Council will be January 9th. And a key item on that agenda is a presentation of the Missing Middle Housing Study. I'll also note on January 23rd, because this has already been brought up by a few council members, we do have public hearings on UDO amendments to flag lots and cottage development standards. Barring any questions on the 8-week look ahead, we can move to other issues and updates, and I'll turn it over to Ben Woody.
Thank you, Rachel. And I didn't know, Ms. Campbell, if you wanted to say any words before we got started today on these issues.
Sure. I think, I guess our last update on our efforts were at a actual work session, maybe sometime in August, to update council on the work of the Independent Review Committee's recommendations. We have a staff project manager. We had a matrix that was produced that we are kind of using as kind of our work program in order for us to track both the recommendations and the progress made on those efforts. So what you're going to hear today is another update from our, August meeting. I would like to go on record of saying I am so pleased with the work and the progress that staff is making on these recommendations. And I will now turn it over to Ben Woody for him to provide the more detailed overview and presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I agree with your comments. really, and we have a lot of staff here today to answer questions if necessary. And Allison, if you can go ahead and pull up the presentation. And I'll start with, I'm going to actually do the presentation today in the interest of time, so we're not going to have handoffs. And this is going to be much more brief than the last presentation. But before I get started, I want to recognize Beth Beekle. She is here today, and she has been our dedicated project manager. She also helps with some of the emergency management recommendations, but she's done a great job of organizing and keeping this project on track. And I would highlight something that Deborah said. We have a matrix that we've been using as kind of a basis for our work, and that's actually linked to your agenda today. So you can certainly pull up the matrix and kind of see the progress. Also, we have a project page where we've tried to include it, like this presentation will go on that page, and we've tried to be transparent with the steps we've taken in response to the IRC recommendations. And just a quick, you got that date right, Deborah. We had August 22nd, we had a work session on this, and that was really the first time that council got to see the staff response and kind of our project approach to these recommendations. But I'll step back a little further and say that we actually got the IRC recommendations in June. So we've had those for about 6 months now, but we're close to 6 months of having those. And a tremendous amount of work has been done by the staff in those 6 months, because we know how important it is, and we know how key it is to be prepared as we move into the holiday season again in cold weather. So I just want to highlight that. And if we can go to the next slide, we will jump right into this. So we'll do key takeaways. I'll review those next, but then we're going to touch on some of the recommendations and things that have happened. And I'm going to continue to work through the 3 topic areas that the IRC used. So again, we're using kind of their format for this. Next slide, please. Many, and if you look at the matrix and the items that are complete are in green, many of the recommendations are actually complete. All of the recommendations are underway. And you'll see that the recommendations that are in orange are ones that we have a completion date known to us, and the ones that are in red are ones that we're still actively working on. So again, you can kind of see the progress that's been made on addressing the IRC recommendations. And again, we do appreciate the work of that body. We're committed to following through with the responses. We're going to continue to keep the matrix updated. We will come back to council as needed to provide updates. And I would note one thing, just when something's green indicating it's done, it just means we've completed the work that was included in the recommendation, but we will continue to train, exercise, and build muscle memory around those recommendations. So again, it doesn't, just because it's done doesn't mean it stops for the organization. We are proactively making winter weather preparations. That includes technical things that the water department's doing to equipment and infrastructure, as well as making communications a priority and being prepared for anything that may come. And finally, a big piece of our success in implementing or responding to the IRC recommendations is the completion of our emergency operations plan and continuity of operations plan. Those are now complete and provide the framework for our organization and how we are able to prepare for, respond, and recover from an incident. So if we can go to the next slide. So I'll go through each kind of bucket, each topic area, and I'll stop to take questions. So we're going to start with water system operations and recommendations. So we have 2 staff from water here today. I have Leslie Carrero, the Assistant Director of the Water Resources Department. And we have Clay Chandler, who's our new Public Information Officer for water. And we'll talk more about that in the communications section, but they are here to answer questions. So if we can go to the next slide. This is the slide that we showed in August. I wanted to preserve this. We had a total of 10 recommendations from the water subcommittee of the IRC. We highlighted 4 of those as being key recommendations. So I do want to give an update on those 4. If we can go to the next slide. Large diameter valve assessment. Some of the things that have happened since we received the report is we have been able to hire new staff and create a dedicated valve crew. So we have staff that are dedicated to making sure that our valves are maintained, monitored, and functional as they need to be. So far, we've inspected over 100 large transmission valves, and we have a RFP, request for proposal, that's set to post in January to bring in some outside contracted services to help us continue that progress. The goal obviously being to regularly inspect all our valves in the distribution network. So again, that's the progress we've made on that item. The next item is our advanced metering infrastructure project, or AMI. This is updated meters that all 60,000 plus customers will have installed over the next few years. The AMI system is the true benefit. It's a benefit to the customer because they're able to better monitor their usage, but it's also a benefit to the water department because we are better able to monitor system usage. So it's a very important tool and something the IRC flagged. We are 7% complete with that project. We estimate substantial completion in 2025. What I think you'll see in terms of the completion percentage is that's going to really begin to pick up because we've been able to do our initial testing, our pilot installations, making sure we understand the best way to be successful. So I think you'll see that percentage really begin to pick up over the coming months. Our water resources engineering division, we have worked hard to realign the duties within that division to make sure that our engineering services, number one, provide increased support to water production, but also to make sure that we have our engineers on staff truly integrated into the operations of the water department. The other thing they look for is in FY25, there'll be a budget request to add an additional engineer specifically geared or dedicated to our water production side of water. And I'll stop there and let Ms. Campbell make a comment or ask a question.
Ben, I just wanted to go back to the AMI effort because this is really important for us to be able to get to that monthly billing cycle. And I think all of us want to get into this space of getting out of the bi-monthly and getting into the monthly billing. So we really understand the importance of this, and we're doing our best to accelerate this effort as quickly as possible.
Yeah, great, Deborah. Thank you for that addition and that connectivity from that project, even to the way we bill and water. Last item I want to cover, and then we'll take some questions, is the East Asheville Booster Pump Station. The IRC did recommend that we conduct a preliminary engineering report, which we have selected Hazen & Sawyer, they're actually the contractor that worked directly with the IRC to do some modeling in the IRC's work. So there's a lot of connectivity there. Council did approve that contract at your November meeting. That's a not to exceed $240,000 contract. And we anticipate the kickoff of that engineering report to happen in January of 2024. So I will stop there. Are any questions on our water recommendations and progress? Great. So we'll go to the next slide. Look, we have a couple additional actions. If you can go to the next slide, Allison, I'm sorry. Yeah. These are a little bit outside of the IRC report, but things that I just want to mention. We are preparing our infrastructure, the staff for the whole year, and they continue to do this, making sure that the actual infrastructure itself, the components and the parts of the plant, the distribution system, making sure that those are resilient and we're prepared. We have redundancies in place and we're doing things to avoid, any kind of failure there as best we can. Continue to install district zone meters, which in addition to the AMI allow us to more accurately track production and usage. Tabletop training has been a big priority. Water is doing that internally with their own department, but of course they also participate in our emergency operations planning exercises and training. As a matter of fact, I didn't plan this way, but we actually have an organizational EOP training later today. So we're going to leave this briefing and go to a training. And then finally, water department has developed winter weather preparation procedures, including standard operating procedures, again, to make sure that we are consistently prepared for any cold weather impacts. And that includes, again, communications and operations. So next slide, please. So I'm going to jump into communications. If we can go to the next slide. We got ahead of ourselves there. We got Dawa Hitch is on the call today. If we can go back to communications, Allison, please. Yep, got to go. There we go. Donna's here today to answer any questions. Again, we have actually, and I'll say Clay Chandler is also here, who is the water PIO. But you can see there were 11 recommendations. There were 4 key recommendations. If we can go to the next slide. I think we made progress on that. We were able to hire Clay Chandler on October 20th of this year. So I'm still going to call Clay relatively new to the organization, but he has integrated himself very quickly. He works very closely with our CAPE team to make sure that we have integrated strategic communication efforts and planning in place to support our water department. So again, we're continuing to integrate Clay and make improvements as we go. CAPE has, one of the key recommendations was training and protocol. So our CAPE staff have completed all of the incident command system training that was recommended by the IRC. And I'll talk about this a little more under emergency operations, but we also have an updated approach to crisis communication that's integrated into how we manage our EOP. So I'll show you that in a minute, but there are levels in the EOP that correspond with kind of how we ramp up our efforts. So we feel a lot better about the correlation between communication and severity of an incident. And then finally, CAPE continues to meet regularly with our media. We appreciate the response and the importance of media in terms of communicating when there's a need to get information out. So we have monthly meetings with them that seem to be going well and are well received. Next slide, please. Just to highlight some of what hopefully the community's seen, but we are trying to be proactive with preparedness communication. November was our emergency preparedness campaign and a lot of social media activity, going to meetings, the Festival of Neighborhoods, just trying to get the word out on terms of being prepared. Water, we have a specific December winter weather preparedness campaign that really relates to water. So look for more of that information to continue coming out from the city and our partners. And then finally, we are really trying to work closely between Water's new PIO and CAPE to make sure that we improve our usage of the AVO alert system. AVO alert is a tool, but not the only tool, but we want to make sure we continue to enhance that. And then finally, making sure that the communication mediums that we do use are consistent or kind of match the levels of activation that come out of our EOC and complexity analysis. Any questions on communication? Councilwoman Mosley.
You recall in the presentation under communications, there was also a bit of time dedicated to the role of electeds. I'm wondering if we have any plans for training for us to ensure that we don't, frankly, run afoul of the charter.
We do, and I'm actually going to call on Jeremy Knighton to talk about our integrated preparedness planning process. Jeremy, do you mind responding to that?
No, thanks, Ben. Good morning, Vice Mayor, Council. So today, actually, we are getting ready to lead the entire city and the planning team through an integrated preparedness workshop. And through this workshop, we're going to focus our efforts on what's the next steps and how do we keep the plan relevant, updated, but also it's a holistic look at our preparedness throughout the organization. And a part of that is the training for everyone, to include our city council. But we need, as a group, through this workshop, we will kind of agree on those objectives, and then we'll be able to narrow down our focus for the next year and what that looks like. However, we do have a couple of deliverables that are coming. One is an elected officials guide to our emergency operations plan, and how we will use that and how we will train on that are coming. We really had a large milestone in getting the plans completed, and in that I guess final draft status, because as you know, no plan is ever complete. So we're continuing to look at that, continuing to improve, but the elected officials guide is coming and will be a part of that, central part of that training and preparedness as we move forward. Councilwoman Roney?
Well, first, thank you. And I've seen you go on tours citywide, and I really think that that helps to add to the public trust of what it looks like to have emergency preparedness and response. Is proactive. And also congratulations on being named as our assistant fire chief. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Jeremy. And yes, Jeremy is our recently promoted to assistant fire chief, and we're very fortunate to have Jeremy and his leadership in this organization. Any other communication questions? I'll move to last but not least, emergency response. So next slide, please. So we had 16 recommendations from the committee on emergency response, and we really identified 3 key recommendations with 3 key areas that we could actually address the IRC recommendations. So if we'll go to the next slide. As Jeremy alluded to, we have completed the EOP and COOP, the Emergency Operations Plan and Continuity of Operations Plan. And I think you said something very poignant. It's a plan is not really complete. We have the framework in place, but of course we have to continue to exercise and update the plans and our training and our response, build that muscle memory to make sure that we are able to really integrate this into our organizational culture. And Jeremy is leading us and helping us do that. Another piece is the integrated preparedness workshop plan, and that really lays out how we plan and train over the next 3 to 5 years. That does include elected officials. So that is forthcoming for the city council. And again, it won't be a one-time thing. It'll be a recurring thing that we'll do with council and future councils. And then finally, we want to make sure that we are implementing things that need to be implementing and tracking benchmarks to make sure that we are successful. And if we're not, then we'll make adjustments as we need to. So just a much more intentional and thoughtful process towards emergency response, which again is consistent with the IRC recommended we do. Last thing is the idea of this, we talked about this before, but this complexity analysis. This is a tool that not only Jeremy, but the city staff will use to help us understand the severity of an incident and when we need to mobilize and go through different levels of the Emergency Operations Center. A really good recent example where when we use a complexity analysis tool a lot actually, but a good example recently where we used it successfully, and again, kind of got to test it and build that muscle memory, is the wildfires. As council members, we had some really dry, windy conditions that created some wildfire threats in our community. We completed the complexity analysis. We realized that yes, it was something that we need to have a heightened state of awareness around, be prepared for. We activated our Emergency Operations Center. Our strategic leadership group met. That's a multi-departmental diverse group to try to plan and be prepared for this, what could have been a very detrimental set of conditions. We briefed our department directors. We sent written email updates to the elected officials to make sure you understood that we were kind of ramping up our efforts. We collaborated with the county, any other agencies, Forestry Service, and we moved through this process just to make sure that we were prepared internally and with our partners in the event something unexpected or unfortunate happened. Fortunately, it didn't, but we operated at a heightened level of awareness for a few weeks, I think. And ultimately, there was no significant loss of property. We returned to normal operations. That's always the best outcome, but it's just a good example of how we are trying to anticipate, prepare, and be ready as an organization. Next slide, please. I'll do these really quick. We're wrapping up. This is our complexity analysis. This is the tool that staff will use. I think if you hit the next slide, it should have there we go. It creates a point system that helps us better understand how to prepare and respond to a potential incident. If you'll go to the next slide, Allison. And finally, these are our activation levels, and you can see level 5 is normal operations all the way down to level 1, which is a full activation. And under each of those levels, you can see how the staff and the communication and things begin to ramp up as the potential severity of the incident increases. So again, there's a correlation between our response and the nature of the incident. And if we can go to the next slide. Any questions on emergency operations? And again, I want to recognize Jeremy Knight, who's here today, of course, to answer those questions. Great, then I'll move through this pretty quickly, but I'll conclude my presentation. Again, we are taking the IRC recommendations extremely seriously. We know they're important, and we just want to assure our community that we are preparing and are ready to respond to any incident that may occur. So again, all this information can be found on the project page, and of course is available to the community for review. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Campbell.
Well, I would also encourage the community. I think the county as well as the city has information out on our website about individuals getting prepared for winter weather as well, because we need the entire community to be prepared. In addition to us preparing and getting our house in order, we need individuals to get their houses in order as well. So if there's anything that we can do to help in that effort, please call on us. But I just wanted to make sure that this was a collective community preparation effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. And I want to thank the staff that have worked on this and continue to make this a priority. With that, I'll turn it back over to Rachel Wood.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Deborah. And thank you to the team that's been working on our response to the IRC report, as well as our emergency operations plan. Next on the agenda for today's agenda briefing is an update on the Community Reparations Commission's request to extend their project timeline. And I am actually going to let our multiple award-winning Director of Equity and Inclusion start with this presentation, and then am available to provide additional details throughout the presentation myself as well.
Thank you, Rachel. Good afternoon. We're in the afternoon now, Vice Mayor and Council members. Good to see you today. Allison, next slide. Let's start with our key takeaways. The City Council adopted the reparations resolution, did not establish a deadline for the Commission to finalize recommendations, and the Community Reparations Commission appointments did not include specified terms. On August 16th of this year, the CRC approved the resolution requesting to extend their work until December 2024. City and county staff believe there is a workable plan for the Commission to successfully complete their charge by summer of 2024. And we are committed to providing the support necessary to ensure the success of the CRC. The Board of County Commissioners received an update from the county staff on November 24th at their briefing, and committed to providing continued support through June 30th, 2024. Next slide, thank you. So just a few other dates. On September 18th, a resolution was presented by a member of the CRC to extend the process for 2 years to April 2026. At their meeting, as we noted, October 16th, the CRC members voted to request an extension to December 2024 and stated a detailed justification would be provided per staff's request. On November 6th, the CRC members revisited the extension request and did not provide additional justification. And at our meeting this past Monday, CRC requested to discuss the extension request directly with City Council. The CRC chair, Dr. Dwight Mullen, would be added to the December 12th City Council agenda. Next slide. A little background: on July 14, 2020, Council passed a resolution supporting community reparations for Black Asheville. The resolution directs the city manager to establish a process within a year to develop short, medium, and long-term recommendations. Establish within the next year a new commission empowered to make short, medium, and long-term recommendations that will make significant progress toward repairing the damage caused by public and private systematic racism. At that time, no timeline was established in the resolution for the work of the commission. The members of the commission, Community Reparations Commission, were appointed by Asheville City Council on March 8, 2022. and the Buncombe County Board of Commissioners on March 15th, 2022. No terms for length of service were included in the appointments. Next slide. A 2-year timeline was developed with the CRC to align with contracts with consultants assisting with meeting, facilitation, and project management. The contract terms are what led to the April 2024 date in the reparations project timeline. On January 24th, 2023, the Asheville City Council approved a resolution authorizing development of a scope of work for a cease to harm audit. Results of the audit will be presented in February 2024. Impact focus areas have drafted recommendations. Those recommendations are being presented to the full CRC for review, feedback, and prioritization. On November 21st, again, 2023, county staff provided an update to the commissioners on the CRC extension and committed to continued support through June 30, 2024. Next slide. The Community Reparations Commission is making excellent progress in finalizing their draft recommendations. And I just want to note that those recommendations they're working on to date have had our feedback. So those are the ones that they're taking a deep dive into. All impact focus area draft recommendations will be presented to the full commission by February 2024. Given that the results of the cease to harm will not be available till February 2024, and the CRC stated desire to conduct additional community engagement prior to finalizing recommendations, staff is recommending to continue current levels of staff support for the work of the commission through June 30th, 2024. The staff will continue to provide needed support to ensure the success of this important effort. Next slide. And just to reiterate our key takeaways, as we stated, the City Council adopted reparations resolution did not establish a deadline for the commission to finalize their recommendations, nor did the CRC appointments have a specified term. On August 16th, the CRC approved a resolution to request to extend their work to December 2024. City and county staff believe there is a workable plan for the commission to successfully complete their charge by this coming summer 2024, being committed to providing support necessary to ensure the success of the CRC, and that the Board of County Commissioners received an update from county staff on the 21st of this year and committed to providing continued support through June 30th, 2024. And at this point, we'll take any questions.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much, Ms. Mills, and congratulate you on all the awards that I was privy to be able to give one of the awards from the land of the sky. So we were glad to actually, be able to present it to you, and so deserving. And but anyway, getting back to the report, I will say, after listening to the request, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just going to. I think the request is actually reasonable, considering the scope of work that was necessary, and also some of the actual conditions. I think that not really being given a concrete timeline to different activities and different obstacles that you ran into, during the process. I think the most important thing, of course, we all would like to see this done as quickly as possible to be able to deliver these services to the community. However, we realized that this was a very difficult undertaking from the beginning, and I think it's important that we get it right. So the requested time, the additional time, as far as I am concerned, I would just like to say, I think it is reasonable, especially in light of different reports that are becoming available that will be necessary to make these commitments. So with that being said, thank you very much for the report and the update, and I greatly appreciate it. Do we have any other? Councilwoman Mosley?
Mine isn't so much a question, but as it relates to the Stop the Harm audit, it looks like it's going to be presented to the commission in February. I just want to throw out there that I would be so appreciative if the folks actually doing the audit could also present to us, because I would love the opportunity to ask them questions directly. Just throwing that part out there.
And we do have plans, Councilmember Mosley, for presentations to, I believe, Equity and Engagement Committee, as well as to full City Council on the results of the Cease the Harm audit.
And just a slight adjustment to the date. They are coming in January to report to staff, mid-January, to report to the commission with a preliminary report in January. And the final report is due in February, and then they will be reporting to the governing bodies in March. So they're getting it. And I also want to reiterate that the Cease the Harm is not an audit that's doing recommendations for the commission. It is an audit of the city and county internal functions as it relates to the 5 focus areas that the Reparations Commission is working on, as well as looking at internal workforce, legal, and equity. They will have recommendations. They will have ideas around things that we need to adjust. They have also been working with Ref Tillis in their review of human resources and meeting with cohort groups. I just want to make that understanding. Thank you.
Councilwoman, I think, Alden?
I guess a question for staff. I don't understand the difference if the group is recommending towards December, why staff is proposing half that time.
So the recommendation to look at June is really to have a reassessment at that time. As Brenda mentioned in her presentation, there is a really solid workable plan to have recommendations finalized in spring and early summer of 2024. And so our recommendation is let's take a look late spring, early summer at where they are. And we want to provide whatever necessary support to ensure the success of this effort. But it seems a little bit premature given that we are on such a positive trajectory and the recommendations are nearing completion from the commission itself. We also have a plan in place for the development of the report. And so that's really our recommendation is let's see how far we get. It's a little bit early to say we're not going to be ready by April or June to say, sure, we need to look at going all the way to December.
I guess it's just, I don't know. I feel like, is the plan our plan or their plan? I just feel a little confused being out of sync if we're going to be establishing a pattern of trust and deference to their expertise and leadership. This feels like the first time staff has been like, we disagree and we want to, I don't know. I guess I'd like to hear, and we'll hear from Dr. Mullins on Tuesday. So I don't feel like I have enough information on why there's different opinions there. And my knee-jerk reaction is to need to hear a lot more from them of why we would do something different than what they went through the process of recommending.
Councilwoman Mosley?
So actually, the last thing you said, Brenda, brought up a question for me, and it's occurred to me that this might be a question for Dr. Mullen, but you can tell me if this is already being contemplated. You indicated that the results of the audit will be coming to us in March. I wonder, has there been consideration on how to will that results-based audit also include suggestions for how to move forward? And here's why I'm asking that question. When I look at other localities that are doing this type of work, it seems as though Asheville and Buncombe are the only ones that only include community members. So I'm wondering if there's been consideration for eliciting support and analysis from subject matter experts, colleges, university, law firms. Is that a question better suited for Dr. Mullen, or have we already gone down that road? And would we need to get that suggestion or that recommendation from the commission?
That's not been discussed as of this date. The other thing I do want to iterate about the audit is you did emphasize that we're allowing neighborhoods to represent, which is great. The audit will give us more of a policy look, policy, procedure, process look than what we're getting from the Community Reparations Commission, because that's just not been their bailiwick. So we're really excited about that. But are you asking, would we
I guess,
include that? That would be a good suggestion, I would think.
okay, because with that in mind, I just believe that there's got to be a group of folks that are really steeped in policy making to analyze whatever those results are. But we might not need it all. We might be totally perfect and, but to figure out resolutions or how to change policies. And I don't know if that's the necessarily the way the commission would go, considering we're utilizing only community members.
Right. And just a reminder that the cease to harm audit is one of the 2 immediate recommendations that they made. So we are working on an actual recommendation that the commission provided. They voted on it December of 2022. And we've been excited about it. It's been a really good process because we won't get a lot of that policy and procedure work from community members just because of not having the full range of knowledge of our operations. Carter Group will do that. They will also respond to you and help in any way they can in getting these recommendations over the goal line.
Ms. Rowley.
Councilwoman.
Yeah, I guess I would just say I share some of the concerns expressed by Councilmember Ullman. I appreciate the staff recommendation that we would finish on a different timeline than CRC because it does express optimism alongside it. But I worry as an organization that we aren't in alignment at this very structural level of supporting the CRC's recommendation. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the presentation from the chair. Thank you for adding it to the agenda so we can gain some deeper understanding. But I wonder if we might rethink putting out a different recommendation because it doesn't reflect my expectation, which is that we would follow the recommendations of the CRC. And if we finish earlier, fantastic. Happy to hear that too. I just would hope that we would be ready to support first and maybe not present that recommendation that we would be in conflict or disagreement.
And I would just like to add that it's probably not even necessary for staff to say that we're going to do it by June 30th, 2024, because the resolution does not say when this process needs to be over or needs to conclude. We have official action by council that says, well, we're extended to December. Then if it doesn't happen in December, then we've got to extend it again. I think what we're just saying is, we will, from a city staff perspective, we will support this initiative for however long it takes. But we also want us to be very diligent in terms of the time that we've already committed to the process, to encouraging and motivating and inspiring the group to work as judiciously as possible and expeditiously as possible for us to get the work done. So it's not that we're going against them. We are just suggesting that let's cross the bridge if it's necessary. But we'll hear from Dr. Lowen.
Okay. What's next on the agenda?
That is it for us.
Okay, we have a public. Council.
Since we're right up on finishing this at a normal, 12:30 time would be so awesome. But I do have a question about the 8-week agenda. So on the 8-week agenda, there's a conversation about 511 Brevard Road. And it's curious to me that I don't have a lot of clarity on whether or not the previous conditions agreed to for that parcel have been met based on their certificate of occupancy. So if there are any lingering issues with the conditions previously attached to this project, I would love to know before we consider future conditions so that we can establish trust and clarity moving forward.
We'll get that information for you.
Do we have any other comments? If not, thank you all very much, and we'll see.
Great weekend.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.